YouTube. Um, so is
Okay.
there any button that you can make it as a start? I mean, the YouTube one.
Yeah, I just got started. Can you check
Okay.
work?
Um,
So yeah, so actually before we get started, we are also live stream this on YouTube, and we are probably going to also record this event. Is that okay for all the panelists?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
sounds good. Let me also start recording. So Jie, could you help me keep admitting people into this
sure,
event?
sure. Yeah, yeah. Don't worry about that. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So YouTube, it's working now. All right, so maybe let's get started. Um, yeah, so maybe let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Yuhong. I'm going to be the moderator for today's event on PhD Fellowship and Rising Star Award. So I'm a PhD student at Columbia and also part of the Student and System group. So Student and System is a small group of researcher, and we try to we and to organize events to connect the computer science researcher and with a focus on the systems community. And so today's panel discussion will focus on PhD fellowship and Rising Star Awards. So we know that this is a really good way to make our profile better, and it's also good to get more recognition in the community. And also, like PhD fellowship, it comes with a great amount of money, although usually this money won't go into your pocket and usually help ease your advisor's financial pressure. But it's a really good way to get you more recognition and help your profile to stand out when you apply, let's say, for a faculty position. So, and it's not something easy to prepare for. So I actually apply for the Meta PhD fellowship roughly 2 years ago by myself. And back then, I find that there's actually very limited material I can find online to help me to prepare. There's basically nothing I can refer to when I was writing my research statement. So yeah, so today we are fortunate to have four panelists from different university and have won different fellowship or Rising Star awards. We are fortunate to have them to share their experience and their insights into the PhD fellowship. So maybe let me briefly introduce all the panelists, and also I will also give them a chance to introduce themselves in a little bit further. And yeah, so let me get started. So first we have Shima. So Shima is a PhD candidate in the Electrical and Computer Engineering department at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her research interests lie at the intersection of security and privacy, machine learning, system, and fair and trustworthy AI. And second, we have Yu Ke. Yu Ke is a final year PhD candidate in the Department of Computer Science at UCSB. His research interests include systems and compiler for deep learning and parallel programming. His recent project cover graph neural network optimization and acceleration on GPU. And then we have Mark. Mark is currently a candidate in the electrical engineering department at Stanford University. His research centers around designing systems to improve the scalability, performance, and security of data center scale applications such as machine learning. And we also have Yang. I know Yang personally for a long time. So Yang is a final year PhD candidate in computer science at Harvard University. His research interests lie in the area of computer system, especially in networking, operating system, and distributed system. Okay, so I will give all the panelists some time to introduce themselves a bit more and also what kind of fellowship or Rising Star Award you have won. So Shima, do you want to get started first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the introduction. There is just one thing that I'm grateful that I already graduated from UW-Madison. It's within 2 months, so it's kind of new. So yes, I'm not a PhD student anymore, and I joined Visa Research as a research scientist. As Young said, it's my work is in the intersection of privacy and security and machine learning. During my PhD, I wrote a couple of fellowships. Not all of them were successful, or I didn't get selected for all of them, but I got selected for the Rising Stars fellowship in electrical and computer engineering, and I would be happy to give you feedback today about the process and what I think worked best for me. We can never like learn what exactly clicked for the committee and what didn't, but yeah, I will share my experience.
Yeah, thank you. Yuko, do you want to go next?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'm the final year PhD student here at UCSB, and I previously applied for the NVIDIA fellowship. And actually, I have been also, before applying for fellowship, I also been working as the internship at NVIDIA as the high performance engineer as well. And but after the fellowship, I also working at NVIDIA as the NVIDIA research as a research intern because they have some opportunities for the recipient of this kind of fellowship to have opportunity to join their research lab to conduct some of the research experiments or like a research experience. So this is my current profile, and through this channel, I think it's a good time to share with you guys about how to submit application before this kind of fellowship, and also what kind of the outcome expect from this kind of fellowship. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. So Mark, do you want to go next?
Yeah. First of all, I should say thank you everyone for tuning into this. It's crazy to see how many people there are. So thank you. And thank you Hong for organizing everything. Yeah, so I guess this is my 6th year at Stanford. Um I work in kind of systems, distributed systems for machine learning very broadly. Uh, and I started off in kind of computer architecture and moved gradually into more systemsy sides of things. Um, and so I maybe like a lot of other people here applied for a lot of fellowships, didn't get all of them. But last year I was fortunate enough to be selected for the Meta AI Software Hardware Co-Design Fellowship. And then there is a new kind of like ML Commons sponsored ML and Systems Rising Stars event, I guess, workshop that I was fortunate also enough to attend last year.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Yang, do you want to also introduce?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Yang, and I'm a final year at Harvard. So as Yuhong said, I work on a lot of system problems, and recently I have been focusing on like doing some system for machine learning and those type of very trendy things, trying to explore this type of areas of research. And I applied for my fellowship probably 2 years ago, actually 3 years ago, I think. I got the fellowship from Google in 2022, and they support me for 2 years, and now I'm gonna graduate. And if I unfortunately need to stay for one more year, they actually can support me for one more year. So it's pretty flexible. I'm happy to share any more benefits and any events they organize through this fellowship process. I also did many internships with Google, mostly benefiting from this fellowship program from Google. They have some monthly meeting with some Google mentors, which is pretty helpful. Happy to share more experience in that regard.
That sounds amazing. Thanks for all the panels for the introduction. So the first topic we want to cover in this panel discussion is writing the research statements. So I would say this is one of the most important step in applying for a fellowship. So, and for many of us, this will probably be the first time to write a research proposal for funding during our PhD journey. So it might be tricky to see how should we write it in a way that can best represent ourselves. And also, I want to highlight that all of our panelists have generally shared their application material when they apply for fellowship or Rising Star Awards. So you can find their material in our event page. Oh, by the way, Mark, our teammate hasn't got a chance to add your research statement to our website, so I will just share the link in the chat.
Sure.
All right. So regarding the writing of the research statements, let's start by so I will start by asking our panelists, how do you structure a research statement when you write such application material for fellowship? Like there are many things we want to cover in a research statement, like our past research experience, our research vision, and how our research is relevant to, let's say, the fellowship awarding company. So with so many components, how do you organize everything and put everything together in your statement? Any thoughts from our panelists?
So one thing I normally did is I try to think of what would be the title for my proposal, and that would be the top umbrella for all the content I want to put in the statement. And sometimes once you get a good title that is really striking people's eyes, then you can probably get a really good chance of getting. That's my experience writing a proposal. And sometimes after you got a title, you need to I normally put in some three big sections. The first, you talk about the background, the environment you're working on. For example, I work on data center, and I believe Mark is also on data center computing. And then you introduce what's the goals and what you want to achieve and what's the current problems. Then later on, I would just put all my major research project, maybe just one major research project into the main content, then later talk about other research projects. Finally, just a conclusion and some future work along with the conclusion. That's my typical structure.
Yeah, I think I just want to highlight two things maybe that you said, which I think are really important. One is, you mentioned that how does this help the, sponsor or company, right? I think like nailing that is really important. Like you can, I mean, these companies do a lot of things, right? So I think you don't need to like, you know, redefine your research agenda just to fit like one specific niche that you think they want, but more so like kind of adapting your strengths and expertise to something that they care about. And some of these fellowships, I think, for example, the Meta one, or I'm not sure, yeah, will tell you like, this is the sub area that they're caring about. Some or other ones are pretty general, but yeah, I think that the first thing is, why should the company like sponsor you? Like, what do they get from it? But secondly, like, why are you the right person to do it, right? And that's where you can bring in a lot of your like, hey, this is my research experience. This is why like what I do is cool, and why like I have the background to succeed in it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Mark, could you give like an example of how, for example, in your case, you make your research agenda more relevant to, in your case, Meta?
Yeah, so I will say that probably the best way of making it relevant is go and work there, which I was fortunate enough to do. So maybe that's kind of like a cheat code to understanding like the internal problems and challenges that they have, which again, I totally realize that like not everyone has that opportunity, especially if you're applying to a lot of different fellowships. But I mean, that being said, like you or your advisors, I'm sure, have a lot of connections at these companies. And yeah, definitely just like reach out and talk to people and chat and say like, hey, what are you, working on? What are big problems here? Read papers that come out of these companies, especially the team that like is sponsoring this. If you can like, you know, uh, if you know exactly who's going to be making the decision, just understand what they're working on, and the papers that they publish are often a good avenue to kind of get a sense of what they care about. Um, but yeah, at least for me, I was fortunate enough to like actually uh, kind of work on adjacent areas to in like the hardware software co-design space at Meta. So uh, maybe a cheat code there.
I see. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So basically, if you can identify what is the challenge they have in the sponsoring company and make your research sound relevant to that, that seems like a good way to increase the chance of getting the fellowship. I think that's also similar in your case, right? I remember that you work in all this like GPU related research, and which sounds very relevant for
Yeah.
NVIDIA.
Yeah, exactly. I think here are some like points that I can share is that for the NVIDIA like fellowship, I found that they have like several focus. For example, one of the focus because we are doing like some GPU optimizations, definitely for the kernel level, those low level optimizations. For example, for deep learning computation, some low level kernel rewriting or this kind of related topics that definitely fit into this kind of context because we need to leverage GPU for computation. So this is the first type. The second type is that we could focus on something like more high level, for example, for algorithm side. For example, when you are talking about the research in the computer vision, these days, a lot of large language model stuff, or this kind of robotics or embodied AI, all this kind of high level from the algorithm perspective, they also appreciate that as well, because that is how we can better utilize GPU for many different kind of actual impact on the social or on the real world. So this is the second part. Additionally, I also noticed they have like they also could appreciate some original like GPU originally designed for the graphics processing. So definitely, if you are doing some research inside the like graphics domain, for example, like the rendering or like how to build the visual artifacts, all these kind of related topics, they can also appreciate that. So those are the typical three major categories. If you find your research fit into, you definitely can you definitely can orchestrate your research of your research interest and the domain and also your personal profile towards these kind of three major categories.
I see. Yeah. I wonder like how did you find out like the research focus of NVIDIA? Is it like they list it on your website or because you have some collaborations?
Yeah. When I got this kind of their category or major of the company focus is that when I doing research at the NVIDIA research, I found that their research department usually typically categorized into three major directions, and these three major directions is also they are actually actively pushing forward to. So definitely, if the research of your current work can fit into this kind of domain, it definitely have a better match because later on for your like a research application materials will also be reviewed by these kind of panels inside their companies. So if they can find something closely match their target or their current project, they will find the value of your current work that definitely be appreciated more. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. So like basically besides reading paper from those research group and talking to them, collaborating with them is also a good way to get insight of what's their focus and
Yes.
how to make their research sounds relevant.
Yes. Yeah, another channel to get this kind of information is that because each year they're usually hosting some like annual events like the GTC conference. They will mention about what their current trend of this kind of research directions, what kind of project they are focusing on. These are also a good channel for them to for students to get an insight of it. And for example, this year they also highlighted something related to a robot like the embodied AI is kind of topic. I think that would definitely also have good fit. Yes.
Yeah, that's really useful for anyone
Yes.
interested in
Yes.
NVIDIA fellowship. So, Yang, do you have anything to add on top of that?
Let me think of I so I
Like,
basically for
sorry.
my part, oops. Yeah. So for my part, I actually cover some of my collaboration while I did internship with Google. It's not a technical internship. It's basically collaboration with Google's people. And they have some oh yeah, they published some paper. I remember in some Ask Plus conference they published 2 years ago on something called file memory. Then later on, they try to think of if they can do file memory over data center networks, but they're worried about fault tolerance. Then that's where we reach a collaboration. And I covered that project. That's basically literally their research-wide explorations, and that's why probably my proposal can catch some of their engineers' eyes and get the award. Yeah.
I see. So when you write your statement, it's like you highlight this collaboration with Google and the impact you have there at the very beginning.
Yeah, only I actually didn't highlight too much, just mention words, a sentence, but mostly that's when you talk about that topic, people will realize, oh, it's possibly deployable inside Google or usable inside Google, or at least inspiring some of Google's people.
I see. Yeah, that's interesting. So
Mhm.
I wonder, like, for Rising Star Awards, how do you how do you structure your research statements? I
Yeah, so
remember
for
that, sorry, I remember that it has a very strict limit on the number of page you could have. So how do you fit into like your research experience and research agenda in such limited space?
yeah, for Rising Stars, it's different than company-based fellowships because there is no like specific research agenda that you should fit in, which makes it, I don't know if it's easier or harder to get. But usually what I would do is I would focus a lot about the motivation of the research statement. So you have to spend some time to position yourself within the field, why you're doing what you're doing. How is it different than what is already existing in the literature, what people have been doing? Why we should care about what this specific topic, and then list the contributions. So listing out the motivation behind the work is more or equally important as the work itself. So yeah, I know one page is very limited. And then I think about it in terms of paragraphs. So I would have one paragraph about the motivation, what world we live in, what kind of research I am contributing to, and then what are the problems, why we should care about those problems, and then how I solve the problems. For Rising Stars, it's usually for people who have been working in research for at least 3-4 years. Some people get it earlier, like in their second PhD year or something. So usually people will have something like some papers that they have already produced. So yeah, I'd list in the last paragraph, I would list the contributions I have done very briefly. And then future work is also important, like what kind of questions I want to solve in the future, and again, why you should care about them. So yeah, it's very concise, but that's the flow. Motivation, why we should care, what I have done, what I want to do in the future. 4 paragraphs covering those 4 questions.
I see. Yeah, this is actually related to one question I have when I was writing my research statements. So I think like many of this fellowship program for this research statement, they also ask you to propose a research agenda or kind of share your research visions. So I wonder like, I think usually at the time of applying for fellowship, people already have a bunch of quite rich research experience. And so I wonder, like, how do you balance your research experience and your future research plans? Because it's supposed to be like a research proposal. So should we actually focus more about what we want to do in the future, or should we actually put more space for our past research experience? Any thought from our panelists?
So add something that the other panelists also highlighted. For fellowships, there is this call for fellowship and the subcategories that the company or whatever who's offering the fellowship cares about. And even if our research does not exactly fit within one of those subcategories, there is always a way to position yourself as this kind of work that I have done will be benefit or gives me a set of skills that will be beneficial for the subcategories of research that the company cares about. And then you should bridge this gap between what I have done and how this will contribute to the vision of the fellowship. It's easy said than written or or done, and that's a process that usually students go through with their advisors, like how we can position ourselves, how we can like what kind of future ideas that will fit within this fellowship specifically. So you have to be strategic about what kind of future work you will select for each fellowship, because you can have multiple ideas for future work, but some of them will be relevant and some will not. So you have to think based on the call of the fellowship, which one you will pick.
I see. Yeah, that's interesting. So basically, if we can use our past research experience to show that, okay, the skill we obtain from those experiences can help with our future plan, that will make the proposal sound stronger.
Yes, and what you have worked on, you have been successful in. That's also important, even if it's not very relevant. But at least I have worked on a problem and I have published a paper in a top tier conference, for example, or the technique that I have proposed is like relevant, it's still relevant after a few years. So that you have an impact in general, not even if it's not exactly in the same direction of the fellowship you are applying to. Yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. So any other thoughts from our panelists?
Yeah, I think I also had a similar kind of question, right, when I was trying to figure out this, which was how much to focus on kind of the future versus the past. Some places will tell you very concretely, like, hey, we expect a proposal and like a clear outline, and some people will be kind of vague about it. And I think, at least for me, I focused a lot on like kind of concrete proposal and treat it more as like just a funding proposal. And like kind of listed out, phase 1 is do this, phase 2 do that, and like kind of a longer time frame. And you should probably take it with a grain of salt, but I think that helps a bit if like you can explicitly say like you've thought about it, right? Like you have a concrete plan of kind of the sequence that you want to take to the future work. And I think like regardless of like the outcome of the fellowship or whatever, it's honestly a really good opportunity to kind of just use it to define your research agenda in some ways. Like what I proposed for like the meta fellowship, I actually did. Like I regardless of like if they wanted you to do it or not, like it's a good opportunity to use it to actually think about your research agenda.
Yeah, that almost sounds like you are writing an NSF grant proposal. You have different phases. You basically have a timeline of what research you want to do in the future. So is it like you put this, you first describe your past research experience and then at the end describe what you want to do in the future? Is that the way you structure it?
At least for me, I think it was like, yeah, I was like, hey, this broad domain. And so in my case, it's like, data infrastructure for ML training is really important. Why should we care about it? Hey, this is like a proposal, of this is a problem. These are the steps that we should take to address it. And then at the end, I just say like, hey, this is why like my past experience is a good fit to actually, making that succeed. Again, I think like depending on the specific case, people expect different things. But if it's like a research proposal, then at least that's what I did.
I see. Yeah. I guess another question I have is, for example, Yang, I know that you have experience in many different fields within the system. And so
Yeah.
like in that case, how do you when you are proposing like your overarching research vision, how do you combine your experience in different domain to form like a consistent high level goal?
It's hard. Generally, it's a hard problem. But one thing you can think of, when you have a target environment that you want to improve, for example, the data center, the intuitive thing you can think of is the performance. So that's why I will have the performance keyword when I talk about my research agenda. And of course, talking about performance is not enough, then you need to talk about the security. And therefore, that introduces the security part. And the final piece I add to my proposal is about the management. It's manageable. It's about how you manage at large scale, how you manage it. It basically, you need to start something that you feel is the most important thing, and then you can transit like relatively fluently to the maybe security point that is also important. Then finally, you can think of what's the big word for your rest of your research. But in general, you can use some keywords to chain together all the domains you cross and tie back to the overall umbrella you want to work on, or your proposal is focusing on. Yeah. But I would say that's a hard problem. You sometimes need to iterate many times with your advisor. Yeah.
I see. So basically, like describe your research experience as different aspects of a big challenging problem.
Yeah, that's my feeling. And normally performance and security, that's some kind of two contrasting aspect, right? That's sounds really intuitive to focus on these two aspects of a system. Yeah.
I see. Okay, so the other question I also want to ask our panelists is, when you describe each individual like research project you have in the past, what part of the research project should we highlight? Like there are different aspects, like for example, should we focus on the broader impact of the project, or on maybe the publication in this project, or maybe the technical contribution? So and usually like the space is very limited, so we can only focus maybe on some aspect on one project. So when describing your research experience, how do you make sure that it can help your application most?
Yeah, I think like for this part is more like you need to highlight most is the one that different from the previous work. If there is some other like technical implementation part, because system usually incorporate a lot of technique for implementation. But for all other part, I think it's not the key insight is definitely prioritized, which means the key distinguisher of your work versus some prior works. And you better do a simple comparison with one or two sentences to highlight that. And later on, you probably should also highlight whether there is some potential application in the industry that has actually benefit from this. This would also be will be good like a structure. And usually, I think for one type of the research work, you should keep your overall length to around 5 to 6 line or 5 to 6 sentences, or which compose of one paragraph. Mostly like that. I think you should not usually it's better to keep things concise, because you need to cover broader aspects of your research instead of just keep on one aspects. And in general, I would also say that it's better to start with the one direction, which means you better categorize your work into several different directions instead of just mention the individual specific design points. Because one direction can many for example, if there is a three orthogonal direction, it can compose a large design space or large design point. And your work just address the part of its overall space problems. but you will give the reviewer a sense that in the future, your skill set or your expertise can also be extended to address more broader range of problem in the similar space.
I see. Yeah. So it sounds like if the project has any industry impact, it should definitely be mentioned in
Yes,
your
yes. Yeah, or open source adaptations. Yes, something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Any other thought from our panelists on describing individual research project?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's a hard question, right? Like you mentioned a lot of options, like highlighting, the publication, highlighting the impact, highlighting like the key insights. And yeah, I honestly don't know what the right answer is. I think like, and I think flow is probably the most important thing, and kind of integration into the whole story. Um, like that in my mind, like getting the main idea from it in like a very crisp sentence, the main insights, and then just like connecting that to the flow of your kind of proposal or background, um, helps a lot. Like you don't want it to just you just don't want to you don't like just say an idea and have people not understand why it's important, uh, or why you're even talking about it, but try to connect it back to like your main thesis. And in doing so, I think you should try to highlight impact, but it's I don't know if like I don't necessarily know the best way of doing that, meaning, you know, um it kind of depends on like your project, right? If you open source it and deployed it or something like that, like obviously that would be important. If it's something that's more like maybe security related, it's how you would present impact might be a bit different than like something that's more performance related in terms of just like, hey, we achieved this much throughput benefit or something like that. um, but hopefully like tying the entire story together should help with impacts. So for example, if it's like, hey, we started off by identifying this problem, we built the solution to solve it, but we realized that, hey, there's this other problem. And then so like kind of tying everything together should also hopefully convey some sort of impact, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so basically, if I understand correctly, so if, for example, we can describe a big problem that is challenging and is going to have um, impact on industry, for example, and then describe all the experiments as how, like, as for example, maybe different way to solve this big problem, and make sure the flow is always is also like natural. So that sounds like a good way to compose the entire statement.
Yeah, I think impact should like be clear by the start, right? Like this is an important problem. Like I'm going to solve it, and this will be the impact. And then by the time you're actually describing your works, like hopefully the impact of what will be clear, and you're just trying to tie how each of your projects supports like the main goal, right?
I see. Yeah, thank you. So Shima, do you have anything to add?
So I want to actually echo what Mark actually said, that the story of your research is very important. Not always we have projects that fit in one big piece. Sometimes the project can be disconnected. It happens in the PhD. But if your case, the projects are connected, that's great. Then you have already a natural story to tell about your research and then how each piece fit into the larger story. And by story, I mean we have a goal or a direction that we want to, or a big problem that we want to solve, and all the projects that I have worked on contribute to that vision. If not, then you have again to sit down and think, probably with your advisor and your lab mates, anyone you can get feedback from, about how to pitch your ideas in a way that fit into one story. So sometimes after you have done the work, you can start thinking about the bigger story that collects everything together. That will happen also for example, for the defense, when people get like to the point where they want to defend their thesis, you have to write it in a way that everything fits together in one big story. So yeah, again, it's not an easy or trivial exercise. You have to think deeply on how. Sometimes the projects or the papers will have different components or different parts. You don't have to detail every single part of each paper in the fellowship. You can select from each paper or each project the thing that will fit into one story or will fit into the workshop or the fellowship goal. So yeah, you have to lay down what you have done, pick the parts that will make sense together. And of course, the worst thing is to write, "Hey, I have those papers," and give citation. That's the worst you can do. They should fit in a story. You should have. I thought deeply. There was a question that I thought deeply about, and this is how I solved it, and it led to publication. If there is like a code contribution or something that have been deployed in industry, that's amazing. But this is not the common case. Usually, it's like, I don't know, 5-10% of the cases where your work would actually lead into a product in industry. So if it didn't, just the flow of how you thought about the problem is your actual contribution.
Yeah, thank you, Shima. I also want to ask our panelists, what kind of external help do you use when you are writing your proposal? Did you ask for your advisor to help or ask your peer to review your statement? How do you make sure that your statement is ready when you submit them?
Oh yeah, I actually have several meetings, just open my proposal and line by line, iterate with my advisor, with two of my advisors. And that helps. And especially I have Jess Meekins, who is really good at writing, and he gives a lot of comments, a lot of suggestions. But overall, his point is try to make things more accessible, provided with enough background, and try to at least convince people of one topic in your project. You probably cannot focus on everything in your project, but if you can convince one point and people feel interested, then it's likely that your people will like your proposal. Yeah, that's a strategy they give to me.
Yeah, I can add something, of course, to your advisor. That's a huge source that you should utilize all the time. Your lab mates as well, everyone you contribute with or collaborate with, that's a potential source of feedback. And also most universities have a writing center. I have actually submitted my fellowships to the writing center in Wisconsin-Madison. I got very good feedback because usually the writing center, they don't know exactly what to work on. So that's the most like a general leader that will lead your fellowship. And yeah, so they were very helpful, the writing center. ChatGPT exists now for grammar mistakes, so that's good, but don't rely heavily on it for writing, for the ideas development. That should be your work. ChatGPT can help with the grammar and English in general. I also shared in the chat a list of questions you should think about when you write any proposal or any fellowship. This list is like, my advisor gave it to me in my first meeting, probably. It comes from a very famous DARPA director, listing the questions that you should think about and address in any proposal you're writing. And one of them is to avoid jargon. So you should write the ideas in the most simple and clear way. So yeah, those are my resources. I really advisor, writing center, any collaborator. So yeah, use as much feedback as you can.
Yeah, so it sounds like getting some feedback from an advisor is a really important step to like polish your statements. And like research, like writing center is also an interesting idea because for them, if we can make sure that our statement is accessible to them, then it's probably also true for the people who review our application. Any other idea from the other panelists?
Just echoing Shima's point about kind of like the jargon and non-experts, like have probably whoever reads your proposal will, I mean, for certain, whoever reads your proposal will not know as much about the domain and the area as you do. So, or even your, people in your lab and your collaborators, right? So if you have friends and like just CS in general, right? Maybe a different like lab or even a different like subdomain, not in systems and uh, adjacent areas, it might be useful to have them just read it and see like, hey, was I convinced that this was an important problem, even though I don't work in this field? And am I reasonably convinced that, your proposal makes sense to me?
Yeah, it sounds like getting some feedback from like people who are not experts in our research field is also like quite important to make sure that the statement itself is accessible. So yeah, so maybe let's move on to our next part of the fellowship application. So usually we need to submit some recommendation letter along with our application. I think like for all the fellowship program I know, they require at least one letter from the thesis advisor. But usually they also ask for more letter. So I want to ask our panelists, how did you choose your recommender? For example, if you interned at this company before, did you ask your research mentor, for example, to write a letter for you? Anyone who want to share first?
Yeah, generally you should ask the mentor to highlight your contribution, for example, during the internship process, if that is possible. And also it's more important to have a different people from different institutions to highlight your contribution as well. For example, you can ask your advisor, and also that is one part. And additionally, if you have your other collaborators, which is not from the company, you are currently submit your a fellowship application, that would be also good. Yeah, usually I would say it's better to have people from different angle to describe the overall profile.
So for my case, I had two recommended. I have two letters from three people. So one is from two of my writers. So they co-written a single letter for me, and that's pretty special, but it's doable. And another one is from actually the manager of my mentor at Google. So it's kind of not my direct mentor, but I guess my direct mentor absolutely write something for that manager, so that manager can see something by me. That's something you want somebody that have some is slightly senior if you can find, then that would be a plus to your applications, especially if you apply to some industry fellowships. That's my feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, this sounds like a nice trick we could consider using. Like, so for example, if there are limits on how many letter we can supply, maybe ask like to advisor to write one letter. That's a trick that can help. Any other idea? Thoughts from a panelist?
So it's sometimes there is a trade-off between the quality of the letter, and that depends mostly how much you have worked with that person. So they would know something about you, they have worked, and there's something they know that they can write. It's not like a generic form. And the other thing is the name of the recommender. Like if they are like a famous scientist in the field, of course, that's very tempting if you can ask them for a recommendation letter. But make sure that that person can write something about you specifically, like something they have. Even if you took a course with them, did a project for that course, but they know you. It's you're not just one student in the institution that they work in. I feel like the quality of the letter is more important, or I don't know. That's again, my experience is more important than the name of the recommender. If you can have both, that would be great. If there is someone who's very famous and you have worked with them, awesome. If that's not the case, then I would say ask someone you have worked with, usually your advisor or a previous mentor, someone you have done an internship with, even if it's not from the same company, but someone who knows you.
Thank you, Shima. Yeah, so given that we have limited time, let's jump to our next topic. Like many of our panelists mentioned that they actually have applied for the fellowship many times. So I wonder, like, from which year did you start applying for this fellowship? Because I think one observation is that usually the people who won the fellowship are quite senior in their PhD journey. So I wonder, like, for our panelists, do you think we should start applying early, or should we start applying once we feel more ready about ourselves?
Yeah, I don't think there's any harm in just applying, right? Like it's worst case, it's good practice. And it helps you think about your research a lot. Like I think I started my like second year, something like that. I mean, you want to at least know kind of the area enough to sound knowledgeable on it, but there's definitely no like harm in applying. No one's gonna be like, you've already applied twice, like I'm just gonna auto reject you, right? Like that's people don't think like that. So definitely just yeah, like apply early, apply often. And honestly, I think like your advisor should know, you know, should give you suggestions, and if not, like talk to them and just have a dialogue of like, hey, do you know any fellowships that are open that you suggest I apply to? They obviously want free money, so they'll definitely give you good advice.
Yeah, I see. But I know that for some, I feel like for Google, they actually require to have like a round of internal competition. So you first compete with the applicants within your school. So I just wonder, like, is it possible that, for example, if you get selected in this internal competition, but at the end didn't want the fellowship, does it harm the chance you get selected in the next internal competition? Like people will think, okay, is it still worth giving you another chance? Is that happen or
That's interesting. That's an interesting question. So I know Google's internal competition is pretty, I mean, it's pretty hard for some very top school. I know MIT, you can if you working on system research, that is hard to get one in this internal competition. I know several of my friends, it's really hard to even pass this internal competition. They have like 4 nominations per year, all are from AI. So it's hard. But once you get that internal competitions, from my understanding that you already have your research statement in a pretty good shape, why just submit it to the the fellowship committee, right? And that's pretty natural. I wouldn't say if you pass an internal recommendation, but you do not submit, that rarely happens. Another thing I feel for my case or for my lab, my advisor normally will judge, for example, if you have your first PhD paper published, then it's probably the right time for you to start writing these proposals to apply for fellowships. And sometimes they use this strategy to avoid that you have 2 people apply from the same lab, applying for the same for the same fellowship. That would be something hard to write when they try to write the letters. But yes, I would say once you have some paper you can see about, just try it.
yeah, that's a very useful suggestion. So given that we only have 5 minutes left, let's maybe cover a little bit about once you get selected in a fellowship program, what would happen? So like Yang, you just mentioned that Google has this fellowship, this mentorship program. So how does it work? What's your overall experience with it?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. They connect me with some really senior people inside Google. We have some monthly meeting, and along with the senior people and also my direct mentor, and they're really, really happy to meet with you every 1 hour or every half hour per month. It's not a long time, but you can ask them a lot of questions, not only for the research problem, but also for your career planning, or when you want to apply for faculty jobs, I even ask them for suggestion on my slides. It's a pretty accessible resources I can use once you get paired with some mentors inside these big companies.
Yeah, that sounds really useful. So Shima also know that the Rising Star, they have like a conference for all the people who get selected to meet. So can you share like some of your experience with it?
Yeah, it was a very useful workshop. It's mainly for like setting up the expectations for people if they want to join academia or a research lab in industry. You get a lot of perspectives from faculty members. You meet a lot of people at the same stage who are also weighing their options or even decided on something and no information about it. So it was a helpful, very, very helpful and eye-opening workshop for me, like to get different perspectives. So it's always good to get a fellowship. You'll get some, exposure to other people from different universities. So yeah, I would highly recommend people to apply as much as they can. If they feel like one fellowship is more challenging, maybe keep it when you feel confident, but start early. Start from your first or second year, apply for something and get feedback.
So do they fully funded all the travel cost to attend?
Yes.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yes.
So yeah, so any other thoughts on your experience in the fellowship?
I
Okay.
no, please go ahead.
Good. Okay. So for the NVIDIA fellowship one, just have like they'll just give you the chance to have one more internship as a research internship, guaranteed the internship at there. So you have a chance to work with those researchers, and also they will additionally they will give you like the recent generation of the GPU, for example, as a gift or something like that, like RTX 4090 or something similar. Yeah. And additional to that, I think their fund, different from the Google, is that they will send you the gift money as a fellowship, or as for your stipend, for cover your stipend for entire year. So that is for the NVIDIA fellowship part, but they are currently only for 1 year. Yeah, different from the Google, they have multiple years. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a really big package.
Yes.
To add to that, I think Meta does the same thing. If you do that, just like be careful of taxes and all of that. That's just something to hopefully when you guys get like the awesome fellowship, just be cognizant of all of the details that comes with it. Taxes, withholding, like things like that. But also they don't a lot of these companies like don't tell you everything, so you should check with your like school program office. A lot of schools have like dedicated offices for external funding, and they're able to bill things to the company that is not tuition, right? Like your meal plan, maybe healthcare or even housing or things like that. And just check with them to see you're not like missing anything that you could be taking advantage of.
Yeah, thank you. We are right at the time, so let's give our virtual applause to all the panelists for sharing their valuable perspective and insights. So yeah, we will conclude our panelist discussion here. So just I want to highlight again, all our panelists have shared their application material on our event page. So definitely check it out if you're going to apply for a fellowship. They are I'm sure they are very useful, especially when you are writing your statements. So yeah, thanks. Also, thanks everyone for attending the panel discussion today, and I hope to see everyone in our next event. yeah, have a nice weekend, and
Right.
hope to see you soon.
Right.
Thank
See
you.
you. Bye.
Thank you for
Thanks.
organizing this
Thanks,
event.
everyone. Thanks.
Thanks for organizing.
Bye.
Bye.
Mm.